Hey everybody, welcome to Song for This Day. And if you have returned from one of the previous adventures, thanks for coming back. And if this is your first time, well, you know what they say. You always remember your first time. Now you're wondering, what have you gotten yourself into today? So, I'm going to tell you. Song for This Day. It's about music. And if you remember hula hoops and easy bake ovens that you cooked with a light bulb, and have an intense interest in music, the artists who sang them, songwriters, record companies, and producers, you'll love this show. So stick around. We're going to have some fun because I've created a game that I think you're going to like. Or at least I like it anyway. But I thought we'd start with a question. So we all know that Elvis is the king of rock and roll, and Michael Jackson is the king of pop. And we know Aretha is the queen of soul. And we know that Little Richard ordained himself as the Queen of Rock. And we know that James Brown is the godfather of soul. But my question to you is, who's the godfather of rock? All right, stick around. We're going to come to that soon enough anyway. So here's what we're going to do today. Today we're going to play a game called Musical Connect the Dots. Now, it may be serious, it may be foolish. It may be deep, it may be obscure. Okay, mostly it's foolish, but it's fun. And the deal is, each song that we're going to talk about today is going to be related in some way to the previous song. And we're going to start with Don't Bring Me Down. And we're going to have some whiteboard. If you'd like to take notes, I encourage it because it will be worthwhile. So, you know that Don't Bring Me Down was sung by the Animals, which were fronted by Eric Burdon. You feel like you're at school now? Okay, I don't know if you can read it. It says Don't Bring Me Down. So the song was written by Carole King and Jerry Goffin, and for me, that's kind of an unusual song for Goffin and King to have written, because most of their songs were kind of the more poppy and traditional songs. Songs like Take Good Care of My Baby, The Locomotion, You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman. So Don't Bring Me Down is kind of a harder song and not typical for what they did. In fact, Eric Burdon has said he didn't even know when he was recording it that Goffin and King had written it, but he found out. He said he was in a Los Angeles doctor's office sitting there, and this woman came in and sat down next to him. He was reading a magazine, wasn't paying attention to it, and finally the woman said to him, "I'm Carole King, and I hate what you did to my song." So Eric Burdon is sitting there, so what's he going to say? He says, "I'm sorry?" And at that point, it was her turn to go into the doctor's office. But before she walked in, she stopped, she turned around, and she said, "But I got over it." Now, my guess is that the reason she got over it has to do with the fact that Don't Bring Me Down was a big international top 10 hit and sold over 1 million copies. I bet the royalties helped her get used to it. So I used to travel a lot in my past life, and whenever I did, I always tried to find music in whatever city I was in. And I was in Louisville once, and Eric Burdon and Alan Price, who was the original keyboard player for the Animals, were playing in a small club in Louisville. So I got to the performance late, but just in time, really, because they were then doing a medley of the Animal hits, which of course is what I came to hear anyway. And it was a small club. The club emptied out, so I took an opportunity to introduce myself to Eric Burdon and tell him, "Man, I love all the music you did." And he said, "Thanks." He was a short man, but he was a really nice man. We chatted for a bit. And then I left the club. I was going to walk back to the hotel. It turned out that I was staying at the same hotel that Eric Burdon and Alan Price were staying at. It was a 2-block walk from the hotel. But when I walked outside, there was a huge white stretch limo waiting for Eric Burdon and Alan Price to drive them the same 2 blocks that I was walking. You know what? It's good to be a rock star. All right, now you're going to start to see how this game works. So, we did Don't Bring Me Down, and now we're heading to the boondocks. Or the boondocks, since it didn't fit. Down in the boondocks. Another one there. So you can see, Don't Bring Me Down, and then we got to Down in the Boondocks. How foolish is that? Down in the Boondocks was recorded by Billy Joe Royal. Now, Billy Joe Royal had been in bands since he was 16, and he was good friends with Joe South. Joe South had written some songs. Joe South had a couple of big hits on his own, but he had this song, Joe South, that he wanted to sell to Gene Pitney, who was a big star at the time. So he asked Billy Joe Royal, his friend, if he would record a demo. Of course, he said yes. So he did. Joe South brought the demo to the record label, Columbia, and Columbia listened to it, and they said, yeah, we're going to sign Billy Joe Royal to a 6-year contract. And who cares about Gene Pitney? This is a hit. And it was. It was Billy Joe Royal's first hit. He'd have others. I Knew You When, you might remember. And then there's the lyrically interesting song that he recorded called Cherry Hill Park. He also wrote it, too. Now, in that lyrically interesting song, you might recall that all the boys thought Mary Hill was such a thrill after dark. She must have been a good singer, maybe. I don't know, but they liked her. Joe South would actually have a Grammy-winning song, which he had written. And he also had another song, Walk a Mile in My Shoes. Games People Play was the Grammy-winning song. And he also wrote one of my least favorite songs, I Never Promised You a Rose Garden. A little dreary, but a big hit for so many other artists. Gene Pitney, he did okay for himself. He never actually recorded Down in the Boondocks, but he did have 12 top 40 hits. And he also wrote songs for other artists. He wrote Rubber Ball for Bobby Vee, and he wrote a song for the Chiffons as well, too, which was a big hit. Okay, we're moving on. Here we go. We did Down in the Boondocks, and that was sung by Billy Joe Royal. So now we're going to go to the Royal Guardsmen. I have bad handwriting. I should have been a doctor. So the Royal Guardsmen, they did their first song, Baby Let's Wait. There it is there. And it really didn't chart. It wasn't a big hit for them. It was written, though, by 2 wonderful singers, Laurie Burton and Pam Sawyer, wonderful songwriters, but it didn't work for them. It turned out, though, that the Rascals, the Young Rascals at the time, would record Baby Let's Wait, and that was a top 20 song for them. It kind of introduced us in a quiet way to the Rascals. And Laurie Burton and Pam Sawyer would write their follow-up, the Rascals' follow-up, and that would be, I ain't gonna eat out my heart anymore. Yeah, they did it better than I do. That was also a top 20 hit for the Rascals. The Royal Guardsmen, you of course know that they recorded Snoopy versus the Red Baron, and it was a big hit. And they recorded all the follow-ups, the Red Baron and Snoopy follow-ups, and it kind of locked them into that cliched kind of trite song. The songs are written by Dick Holler, all of the Snoopy songs. And he also wrote a very different song that was a big hit for Dion DiMucci. And that song was called Abraham, Martin, and John. Strange contrast. Snoopy versus the Red Baron, Abraham, Martin, and John. So the Royal Guardsmen, they chose their name because they were coming up at the height of the British invasion. And they figured if they called themselves the Royal Guardsmen, people would assume that they were British and they could benefit from the cachet that all those British groups were kind of getting and dominating the charts at that point. And heck, I mean, they were close enough to the United Kingdom. They were in Florida. All right, maybe not that close. One thing they did do that kind of goes on forever and ever, and that is they did that Snoopy's Christmas song. And in that song, they actually kind of took it, Dick Holler did anyway, he took it from an actual incident that took place during World War I. And in the song, you might remember, Snoopy gets shot down. But it's Christmas. So they share a bottle of champagne, Snoopy and the Red Baron. Well, a similar incident happened during World War I where the Germans and the Allies, it was Christmas, they got together and they celebrated Christmas. And then the next day, they started to shoot each other again. You would have hoped or thought, perhaps, that they could have stretched that whole Christmas feeling for maybe another 20, 30 years, but they didn't. Okay, here we go again. We did Don't Bring Me Down, and then we went down to the Boondocks as Billy Joe Royal, and then the Royal Guardsmen, and they did Baby Let's Wait. Forgive me, I won't write that one down. Now we're going to Tom Waits. All right. I know that there was not an S on the Baby Let's Wait, so you got to forgive me here. A little stretch to get to that. Tom Waits, and we're going to be on the Downtown Train with Tom Waits. Now, Tom Waits is a very interesting guy. He may not be a good singer, or at least not to your taste, a good singer. But he's a remarkable songwriter, composer, actor. He's been in over 40 films. And he said himself, actually, that his songs tend to work along nightlife, drinking, and criminal activity, which we all know are like the top themes for pop tunes, right? Or maybe not. But Downtown Train, a fine tune that Tom Waits wrote, and Bob Seger ran across it. And he thought, this is a good song, I like this, I'm gonna record it, which was unusual for Bob Seger because he usually wrote his own songs, but he liked the Tom Waits song. And he recorded it. And he ran into Rod Stewart, and he mentioned to Rod Stewart that he had recorded this really great song written by Tom Waits. So what did Rod Stewart do? He went in the studio, and a month later, he recorded and released his own song, and it went to number 3 on the pop charts. Bob Seger, nothing. It's a great song, if you like it. But Tom Waits, he may not be your cup of tea in terms of songs and singing. Great songwriter, and his songs have been recorded by a variety of people. Bob Seger, Johnny Cash, the Ramones, Nora Jones. So he gets a lot of creds, and he's written. He's also a Grammy winner. He's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and the Rolling Stone put out their top 100 songwriters, and Tom Waits is number 55. So a very accomplished man in terms of what he does. And like I said, he may not be your cup of tea, but if you listen to his version of Downtown Train, it may not be as polished as the one you've heard on the radio with Rod Stewart. But you know what? It's got a lot more heart and feeling to it because, well, he wrote it. All right, back to the whiteboard. We've been on a downtown train, and now we're in Minneapolis with Soul Asylum, and we're on a runaway train. You see how this is working? Down to the Don't Bring Me Down, Down to the Boondocks by Billy Joe Royal, the Royal Guardsmen, Baby Let's Wait, Tom Waits on his Downtown Train, and Runaway Train. Huh? Is that deep or what? So Soul Asylum, they started out in Minneapolis, and David Perner, the gentleman in the front there in that picture, he was their drummer originally and a co-founder of the group. But he decided to come out front and play guitar, and he did. and he was recognized by a gentleman by the name of Bob Mould. Now, Bob actually was in a band called Husker Du, and he had his own label. And so he recorded a couple of the band's first tunes. Now, the band was named Loud Crash Fools. That would be Loud Crass Fools. Maybe not the best choice for the band or really anything else in this world. Loud Crass Fools. So they recorded it. It didn't go anywhere. But then they decided they were going to do another take. And they thought the secret to the next take would be change the name of the band. So they changed it to Big Dumb Fools. Better name, huh? Soul Asylum worked much better. So, Soul Asylum, they were really the hardest working underground band in the world when they released their first album. And I need to get to the first album's name because it is just so foolish that I can never remember it. But I promise you, you can look this up. This is the name of Soul Asylum's first album. It was called, Say What You Will, Clarence, Carl Sold the Truck. Okay, it didn't sell. So they did a second album, and the second album was called Grave Diggers Union. Just as clever as Charlie We Sold the Truck, right? And it contained our Runaway Train that we have right here. It was, in addition to being a really great Grammy-winning song, it was actually a very worthwhile piece of work because their video included 36 missing children and teenage runaways. And after that video, 21 of them, as a result of that video, were actually found and brought home again. So there's a website still called Runaway Train. I think it's up to 35 now. It used to be 25. And it helps parents try and reunite with children that are either missing or have run away. Now, here's something scary. I don't like to do scary stuff, but when I saw this, I actually had to check it twice because it overwhelmed me. But each year in the US, 400,000 children go missing. That's frightening. 400,000 children. So Runaway Train, it continues to work with parents to help them find and reconnect with their children who have run away or maybe been taken. So the first time I saw Soul Asylum, I wasn't familiar with the band. I think it was on Dick Clark's Rockin' New Year's Eve. And when I saw the band, I thought three things. Number one, I thought, why have I never heard this band before? They're good. And the second thing I thought is, how does a white guy have dreadlocks like David Perner? And the third thing was, where did he get that really cool plaid jacket? Anyway, Soul Asylum. They would go on to have a few more hits, and David Perner would do some solo work and some producing. We're going to move on, and you probably know where. So we went to Don't Bring Me Down, Down in the Boondocks, by Billy Joe Royal, Royal Guardsmen, Baby Let's Wait, Tom Waits on his Downtown Train, Runaway Train, and so you know, we have to go where? To Runaway. By Del Shannon. One of my favorite songs. I think it was the first album I ever bought. And it was during the summer. I think it was #1 all summer long. And I played it incessantly. I loved everything on the album. He even did a better take of the Elvis Presley song of Marie's the name of his latest flame, Del Shannon. Del Shannon had a number of hits. But we're going to talk about From Me to You by the Beatles. Now, the Beatles were a big deal at the time that Del Shannon was coming up and was a star. But they were a big deal in the UK. Not so much here in the US. They had released Please Please Me, and it went nowhere. And then they followed it up with From Me to You. And it hit the atmospheric number on the charts of 116. It didn't even crack the top 100. Now, keep in mind that this is in May of 1963. In just a few short months, the Beatles would turn up on the Ed Sullivan Show, and they would dominate the charts forever. But those first two songs, they went nowhere. Del Shannon, though, Runaway. And then he did Hats Off to Larry. And then he did The Little Town Flirt. And then he did We Gotta Run, We Gotta Hide. And then he did covers of Sea Cruise and Handyman. He was a star. And he ran across the Beatles when he was touring in England. And like I said, they were dominating the UK market, but unheard of in other places, certainly not in the US. But he liked the guys. But more importantly, he liked the music that they wrote. And so he said, hey, I'm going to record From Me to You. And they were like, yes, you will. Do it. So he went back and he recorded it. Now, remember that their version of From Me to You was number 116. So Del Shannon recorded it, and his version, not that much better, he made it all the way to number 77. So tying us in here a little bit, you remember the Traveling Wilburys, an enormous supergroup. I mean, when you think of supergroups, this was a group that was as super as it gets. Bob Dylan, George Harrison, Tom Petty, Jeff Lynne, Roy Orbison. Wow, that was a supergroup. So Petty, while he was in and working with the Traveling Wilburys, was also recording what would be Del Shannon's final album. You may recall one of those Tom Petty songs where he talks about driving down the road, singing a little Runaway with Del. He liked Del Shannon. He thought he was a great artist. And then Roy Orbison passes away in the Traveling Wilburys. And so Tom Petty says, you know what? Del Shannon would be a great replacement for Roy Orbison. Sadly, Del Shannon would take his life before the offer was even made. So he did not make it into the Traveling Wilburys. All right, you ready to move on? Here we go. We've gone from Don't Bring Me Down to Down in the Boondocks by Billy Joe Royal, the Royal Guardsmen, Baby Let's Wait, Tom Waits on his Downtown Train, and then Soul Asylum on their Runaway Train, and then we did Runaway by Del Shannon. Any guesses? What do you think? Anyone? Hands up. I don't see any hands. So we're going to go to another Del Amitri. Maybe not a household name. They were a Scottish group. And they had a couple of hits here in the US. They were much bigger in the UK. They had 7 albums, 3 compilations, 2 live albums, lots of hits. But they only had like really 2 hits that were here in the US marketplace. And one of those hits was a tune called Roll to Me. Now, it was written by one of the band co-founders, Jason Curry. And he didn't really like the song. It wasn't typical of the sound that Del Amitri had. And so they really didn't like performing it very much. In fact, they hardly ever performed it. But they did perform it on David Letterman's show in 1995. And I guess there was some time left over that David had. He needed to fill some time. And so he invited him over to sit down and talk with Mr. Curry. And he asked him a few questions. And then he said to him, I wonder, inspiration for the song. He said, was this like something from a previous girlfriend or something that conjured up this idea? And he said, in a straight face, no, David, Roll to Me is a song about a girl in a wheelchair. He really didn't like the song, and that pretty much ended the conversation as well, too. They had another semi-hit called Always the Last to Know. And as you might imagine, as the title signifies, it's a song about a disintegrating relationship. And horror king Stephen King has said that this is one of his favorite songs. And I quote, he said, it's just so goddamn sad. And you would imagine, a guy who writes horror stories, you would think he'd want to hear something happy and poppy, but he likes this song because it is just so sad. Okay, one last review. Here we go. Don't Bring Me Down to Down in the Boondocks by Billy Joe Royal, to the Royal Guardsmen and Baby Let's Wait, and then Tom Waits with Downtown Train. Then we got on the Runaway Train with Soul Asylum, and then Runaway with Shannon, and then Delamitri, Rolling to Me. So, I didn't promise you a rose garden. But I hope I promised you something that was fun and that you enjoyed. I enjoyed putting it together. I enjoyed doing it here. But wait, not baby, let's wait. We started out and we asked that question. If Elvis is the king of rock and roll, and Michael Jackson is the king of pop, and Aretha, the queen of soul, and Little Richard, self-proclaimed queen of rock, and of course we have James Brown, the godfather of soul. So who might be the godfather of rock? Anyone? No? Okay. There really isn't one, so I'm going to name one for future reference. I'm going to say the godfather of rock is Chuck Berry. Think about it. His riff that he created for those first songs that he wrote, they were all the same song. He just changed the lyrics, but he had that guitar riff. I didn't bring the guitar today because I was told not to. From people who listened to it before and said, don't do that again. Same riff in so many songs that was lifted by so many artists. Even some of his melodies, the Beach Boys, when they started out, they were constantly taking Chuck Berry songs and just changing the lyrics to surf lyrics. So I'm going to say Chuck Berry is the godfather of rock. And I defy you to challenge me on that. But if you'd like to, go ahead. Okay, that's it for Musical Connect the Dots. I hope you had fun. Thanks for riding along. My name is Ed Walsh. This is Song for This Day. And I do a daily blog about music. One song gets sent out each morning, and a little information, amusing, interesting, obscure about that song, along with a video and lyrics so you can sing along. If you would like to receive this song, I would be happy to send it to you. You can join the list. No obligation. The obligation is enjoy. It's free. Send me your email to songforthisday, no spaces, at gmail.com. That would be songforthisday@gmail.com, and I would be happy to include you on our emailing. So, thanks for riding along. Hope you had fun. And check out the previous songs for this day on this channel. They're just as good. And if you'd like to send me some comments, use that email address. But don't send me anything bad. I don't read bad stuff. But if you want to say good stuff, I'm happy to read that. So thanks for riding along. Happy trails until we meet again. Thanks.